Now before we jump into episode 24's review for Garo Vanishing Line, I do want to quickly mention one aspect of episode 23 because I didn't review that episode. I absolutely love how the King of El Dorado was tied into past Garo anime last week, where you get to see that he basically has been fighting all the past Garo characters, and I love that scene because it just ties into his dialogue saying that no matter how many times people try, he always comes back and things like that. I absolutely love how they tie back to past Garo anime last week, and that's absolutely incredible. Now in terms of this episode, I actually think this was as strong of an ending as they could have gave Vanishing Line, hands down. I absolutely love the idea that Sophie loses her memories, because ultimately, from their perspective, this would be for the best. She suffered so much, and also, she's not a Makai alchemist. Ultimately, her goal was her brother. She lost her brother. It would be easier to just wipe her memories, and if she was going to remember, if she was a chosen one who was destined to become a Makai alchemist, she would ultimately remember things down the line. And that's ultimately what happens, and I wasn't sure the direction they're going to go. I thought they were actually going to go the direction that she would forget all the things that happened, but maybe Sword or one of the others were basically looking over the orphanage that she's at, and that's how they're going to end it. But I do like the idea of how she starts slowly remembering things, like seeing motorcycles on the street, seeing the floor of which the nun was killed at, but then ultimately that protection charm that Gina gave her is what ultimately triggered her memories to fully come back. And I love the idea. It says, like, I don't want to forget and I want to become a Makai alchemist. And I love the fact that there was that choice, because if she wasn't destined to become one, she wouldn't have remembered, hands down. And I like how they wrap up Sophie's arc, because she did grow so much and she does have the potential to become an alchemist, or maybe she would fail. But I like the idea of how they went with making her forget her memories, but then also tying up all the other loose ends. And I absolutely adore how they ended the show when you see Sword coming out saying, like, oh man, and they made me eat all this bad food, and then he sees, like, Soph, and he's like, and just kind of walks away. It's such a fitting end because Sword is such a funny and just jokester of a character, and I think that it was just such a fitting way. You know Sophie's gonna start training as an alchemist, you know Sophie's probably gonna punch Sword for abandoning her in her eyes. I absolutely love it, and it's pretty much guaranteed we're gonna eventually get a Vanishing Line movie. It seems like every single Garo anime gets a movie a year after the anime ends. The first series got a movie, the last series got a movie, and I didn't even think many people liked the last series, and it got a movie, so we're probably gonna get another movie, probably focusing maybe on a different horror, or probably focusing on maybe the training for the Makai alchemist stuff. Who knows, but we're probably gonna get a Vanishing Line movie somewhere down the line, probably close to whenever the next Garo anime gets announced, because that seems like how it does, because when Vanishing Line was first starting, the previous Garo anime, I forget what it was called, got announced for a movie, so that's probably what's going to happen. But this series was incredibly enjoyable. There was times where I thought this was my favorite Garo anime, and I think by the time the series wrapped up, I would say it's my second favorite Garo anime. I still think the first Garo anime that came out around 2013, 2014 is still my favorite. I just overall like the characters a bit more, but this is a very strong second. I think for future Garo anime, if they go the route that Vanishing Line went, in this sense of how to make a very likable main character and just a very energetic and entertaining cast, we'd have very good Garo anime down the line, and not revert back to what the previous Garo anime was, which had potential, but then just kind of didn't have that likable of main characters. But ultimately, this was a great ending. I love the fact that you get to see Luke inheriting the armor finally, which is something we all knew would eventually come, and I love that moment where he does transform. All the characters more or less get their wrapping up point, and I absolutely adored that there was sacrifice, the fact that Sophie's brother stays dead, and the fact that Sword's sister also stays dead. They didn't go the route of just bringing them back somehow with some power of friendship. There was sacrifice, there was some heartbreak, but it ultimately ended in a very satisfying way, and I absolutely adored it. I actually really enjoyed the music as well. Last week's episode had this very electronic dubstep OST that you could replace with any single song, and it wouldn't have changed the scenes whatsoever, but this week's episode had a really good use of just kind of piano tracks and more subtle tracks that actually added to the scenes, and if you were to replace it with a different track, it wouldn't have the same impact. Last week's soundtrack wasn't that great. This week, absolutely was. And overall, this was just a perfect kind of epilogue and final chapter for Vanishing Line, and I am looking forward to the movie that will probably happen just based on the past Garo anime and to see where they go with it, because typically the Garo movies seem to be doing pretty well. Overall, Vanishing Line was just a very fun ride. It had some very likable characters. Sword was a breath of fresh air in the main character department. Gina was awesome. I thought Gina would die by the time the series wrapped up, especially when she gave the protection charm to Sophie. I thought that was like a death sentence. I just overall liked the characters, how they progressed. I like the fact that the Dark Knight did have his battle with Luke last week, but ultimately he didn't kill Luke, he kind of like let him lead his path, and then you also get the Dark Knight versus the Golden Knight. It's just overall, they did everything I personally wanted by the end. This wasn't a perfect Garo anime, but it was definitely a very enjoyable one, and one that I would recommend to anyone who was interested in this sort of genre. But let me know your thoughts. What did you think of this episode, the series overall, your favorite moment, your favorite character, whatever you have to say, let me know down in that comment section below. And before you leave, smack that like button, share your support. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.